Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach Podcast. I am so excited to get to introduce you to a fellow occupational therapist who is also passionate about helping people who are struggling with post-concussion syndrome. Shelley Latendresse is a registered and practicing occupational therapist from Tsawwassen, BC, Canada. Her background is in all things neuro, from neurodevelopment to brain injury with special training in TBI concussion and sensory and reflex integration. Shelley is also a practicing certified yoga instructor with a focus on nervous system management and injury recovery. She now also works online as a concussion coach. Shelley is a lifetime member of Concussion Nerds program, which dives deep into concussion assessment and treatment and keeps concussion clinicians up to date on best practices. Shelley has in the past had her own OT clinic, but now she works online and in equestrian, farm, yoga, sports, and community settings, which is so cool. And I'm excited to dive into that with her. She loves the versatility of seeing clients in real life in activities that they love. So I am so excited for this conversation. Shelley, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be so good. So
I'm really happy to be here. Let's go for it.
Yeah, it's going to be so good. So let's start with hearing a little bit more about you. So what got you interested in occupational therapy? And I'm curious, I know you did have a concussion experience yourself. How long had you been practicing OT when you had your injury?
Okay, well, I've been an OT for pretty much as long as I can remember, to be honest. Like meaningful activity is ingrained in my brain. So about 30 years, I guess. And I've always worked in neuro, including brain injury, neurodevelopment, neurodivergent, stroke. I loved my work. And it's always been a creative, holistic practice. I've always gone a little outside the box. I don't like being super narrowed in my scope, but I am a purist OT still. I did things like nature therapy, yoga, adapted bikes, always working with PTs. And so I've loved my OT as a part of me. I spend summers at my cabin, so that's going to come into play in some of the stories today, on a tiny little island. So I'd take the summers off and live there and swimming, biking, adventuring, and stuff like that. So my story starts in 2016. So that's, what is that now? A few years back, 8 years.
A few years ago, yes. Wow.
Yeah. So I was sort of running a pediatric practice, neurodevelopmental practice clinic at the time. And then this kind of all came into play, concussion becoming a part of my life and eventually flipping my practice around to serve that population. So where do I start?
Well, I actually, before we jump into the story, I want to hear, did you always know that you wanted to be an OT? How did that come about?
Oh, yeah. I was really one of those young pickings. So in my teens, I worked with different special needs camps and stuff like that, and had some connections through my mom and through a friend that was an OT. So it really did attract me really young to work in a helping person career and something really creative. And it just kind of hit all the boxes. So I was only like 18 when I went to OT school. So, and I just somehow got in on a whim. I guess I pulled off a good interview because I managed to get in on my first go. So I was the baby of my group when I went to OT school, and pretty naive, I guess. But at the same time, I loved it from the start. And I've changed my role in my career through the years. So that's what I love about OT is you can keep it dynamic. It's not like you can move from job to job and population to population. And I just loved morphing through the world of OT like that. So
I love that. That's so cool. Yes. And that's something that I love about OT as well, is that it is so broad. You can choose occupational therapy and you still have so many options that within that big realm. So yeah, so you had already been working with brain, like neurodevelopmental stuff for a long time. And then you got your own brain injury in 2016. So tell us what happened with it. What were some of the symptoms that you dealt with immediately after?
Yeah, I will. It might take a few minutes. So pull up your coffee mug, because it's a little more complex than your average story. I still avoid telling my story because it's kind of complex and it feels like a blur. Also, I actually had to go and look back at my photo roll, is what I did last night to prepare, and looked at my pictures and trying to get my own facts right. And so my story did impact my role as an OT, because I had worked in brain injury, but mostly like more severe brain injury, not specifically concussion. But I figured I could treat myself as an OT. I could treat myself, which most of that was a good thing, but some things got overlooked. So you're about to hear how that went down. My story is actually repeat concussion, chronic concussion. And this doesn't get talked about. Usually it's about PCS, persistent symptoms. But in my case, I would recover from my concussions and then I would get hit with another concussion. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how that sort of started. And then that sort of spiral of repeated concussions started happening. And sometimes we do hear about repeated concussions or chronic concussion in athletes, because this pattern begins and then they're more easily concussed and it repeats. And I want to talk about why this happens, right? And how it beats you down, but yet makes you a better person. So my story starts in 2016. This was my first head bonk that I really truly identified as concussion. Although now looking back, I could spot some other ones there. I'll paint the picture of my island just because it's so idyllic. So it was late summer. The sun was setting. I was on my beautiful, perfect island. Life was so perfect, so good. I had just kayaked around it. I was running on the beach and the sun was setting and I was looking down for oyster shells, and there was a driftwood log jutting out right at head height coming out from the rocks. And I just ran right into it and clocked myself. And it felt like I just knocked my head off my shoulders. I knew something was wrong right away. In this case, seeing stars and the whole bit. Went back to the cabin, took it easy. But when we got back home, that was when demands were put on me. That was when I started to really, really know something was wrong, because I was a very, very social person, very busy person. September coming back from living on an island is busy. I hosted a TV show at the time, which I could not do. I couldn't think of my lines. And my brain was so tired, just so fuzzy and so tired. And those were the main symptoms I had at that time. I did, though, however, make a full recovery within a month. And back in 2016, there really wasn't much therapy. Plus, as I mentioned, I consider myself my own therapist, knew what to do, blah, blah, blah. So that was an eye-opener to concussion. My son had a concussion. My daughter had a concussion. I felt like, whoa, oh my gosh, now I get this. Okay. So that was my first eye-opener to really know. I don't think you can really know what it feels like until you felt it, to be honest. I appreciate so much the amazing therapists that are out there that help people, but it's just so crazy that you don't know what it feels like till it happens. But anyway, back to life. Concussion is temporary. I'm good. Back to life, just like my kids. But then here's the thing. In January 2017, I had an accident that pretty much knocked my socks off. And I do not celebrate or memorize concussiversaries because I don't think this is healthy. But I know it was about a weekend because I had already done it's a blur, but I know I had done a race. So I'm a very active person. I had done a running race. I had gone skiing. I had done skating. And again, I'm looking through my pictures last night, January 2017, and this is how I remember. And I don't need to see the dates because I can see in the picture what was happening. And maybe in the beginning you could see it too, but probably after a little while, you probably can't see it in the picture, but I can look at my photos and know how I felt inside because I remember. Anyway, I borrowed a friend's skates. Skis, gone up to the mountain. It was only my second time out on this kind of skis, but I'm a downhill skier, so I did not realize that turns out you don't have as much control on skis. And bonus, cross country and skate skiers don't wear helmets. So there's that. So overconfidently, what happened is I got on a black diamond run, got too much speed, hit ice, went forward, somersaulted in the air, and completely landed on my head. It actually, to be honest, I could have died. This was not a good thing. All I said to my friend when she caught up to me is, I just hit my head hard. And then I don't really remember. Somehow we had to get down the mountain. Somehow I got back on my skis. It was a blur. We really had no choice. Then at the bottom, I do have a glimpse of memory because she left me there standing and said, I'm going to go get first aid. You don't look right. I'm just going to go to the bathroom and get first aid. And then as she left me, I stood there alone and just became completely disoriented and began to cry. And people came over and I didn't even know what to say. I didn't even know my name at that point. But, and here's a point I want to make. On the way home, I kept saying to my friend, I'm fine. I am fine. Just take me home. I need to sleep. And I just wanted to pretend that this did not happen. Denial. And here's a tip for coaches, friends, anybody. If someone after a fall like that says they're fine, do not believe them because they're likely not fine. And I was not fine. So the next morning after that, I ended up in the ER, throwing up, dizzy, massive headaches. Of course, we know concussion now. We know the serious symptoms can come on a day or two later, right? Any symptoms can come on. And then, of course, I still, despite the fact that I pretty much could have died, once they clarified that my C-spine was okay and that there was no brain bleed, then you go from getting all this massive care like a super emergency person to, okay, we don't see anything on the scans, so here's your handout. It's a concussion and a whiplash, and you'll be better in 2 weeks. And that's what they actually send you home with.
Yeah. Here, I have a quick question.
So please jump in.
When you were on the mountain, did your friend, after she went and did she get first aid? What did they do any kind of assessment or anything there?
Yes, I skipped that part. So the first aid, was mountain first aid. And I do remember this. I don't remember all of it. I remember concussion. The word concussion was used many times. And I remember them saying, yeah, this happens a lot on our mountain. And I remember thinking, oh my God. And something to do with these runs are pretty steep for cross country. And I just kept thinking, wow, I remember being kind of angry, confused, and just like, what? So that was all I got from the mountain first aid, unfortunately. And you should see your doctor in the morning. You should see your doctor. I think it was evening at the time. Anyway, so this is what happens. Once they figure out that nothing's bleeding and that your spine is not damaged, you're kind of thrown into the wolves, into a lost abyss. So here, on top of that, my family was out of town. So from the ER, I took a cab home. I forgot my shoes.
You left them at the ER?
Yeah, I left them at the ER. And I was a zombie. I was a zombie. So the details are fuzzy, except for remembering how scared I was. Because even lying there in that collar, on the table for hours, getting all these scans, it was just like listening to this painful haze. I just remember all these nurses talking about their Christmas holidays, blah, blah, blah. But it was a fuzz. And I just thought that it was a temporary fuzz. But then you woke up the next day in a fuzz, and the next day in a fuzz, and the next day in a fuzz. And I would literally, it goes beyond brain fog. It goes to a level, I would call it, I would describe myself as a zombie, to be honest. That's how I felt. So I holed up in my house because everyone came home. It was so loud. So I kind of holed up upstairs. I read books. I wore a toque. I'm looking back at my pictures last night. I had aromatherapy. I drank turmeric lattes and blueberry smoothies. I had my pets. I wanted to be alone. I felt like no one understood. And this is how the journey started out. Now, being an OT, I knew enough that I could not stay in a dark room and that I needed to move. So I'm thankful that I knew those two things. Yeah. And I'm thankful. I already knew I was already on a bit of the supplement track. So I was able to get on top of what I was eating and ingesting, and it gave me a sense of power, to be honest. The supplement piece, if I could get the right supplements, that's why I do tell my clients it's a great piece to start, because it's the one thing you can do. And when you're post-concussion, you need to have something you can do. You don't want to just sit there and wait for someone to fix you. That's the biggest mistake you can make. So you need some protocols that you can do. And so that was mine. I could walk, right? I went outside and walked, nature walks, and I could take care of my diet and my supplements. So I did do that. So I think that helps me in the beginning. Then after a couple of weeks of that, this is, I guess, where my being an OT really saved me from falling down like a hole, that I knew the importance of meaningful activity. And I never said like, I can't do something. I always just tried to come up with a creative option. So I really tried to, because my instinct was to be like so mad. And this is another emotion that I wanted to bring out, because I was angry, really. Like, I can't ski. Like, that just, it tears me up just thinking about it, because, just that made me so angry. I can't believe I'm tearing up over that. But people need to know that, like, there's just so much anger if you're an athlete that you can't do what you want to do. But here's the thing. Here's where the snowshoes come. This is the funny part. If I was going to write a book, I thought about writing a book a few times during my recovery. I was going to call it, the first title was Windshield Wipers Make Me Dizzy. Then I was going to call it Why I Hate Snowshoes, because I put away my skis and I bought snowshoes. Okay. I went online and I bought like the fanciest pair of like running snowshoes, sports snowshoes I could find. And now I didn't give you the backstory. Like, I was a very athletic person. I am still an athletic person. I was a very avid skier. I was also into running, biking, swimming, but we'll get more into that. But that gives you the backstory, but I get teared up. So the snowshoes arrived that February for my birthday. At first, they stood for what I wasn't doing. These snowshoes were like, damn it, I'm not skiing. But I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm going to go snowshoeing. This is it. So I get those snowshoes out and I'm like, it's just the same as walking. I'll be fine. So I flipped the script in my mind. I flipped the script because I knew that's what I had to do, and be like, I can snowshoe. Okay, I can snowshoe. So I became obsessed with snowshoeing that early spring. And I found that in the mountains, in the snow, in the awe, in the beauty, in the quiet, in the exercise, I felt good. And the cold felt good. It cleared my brain. It shocked me. I put ice on my face and stuff. I liked building up, like getting my heart rate going. I felt good. And there was the beauty. It was very spiritual in the mountains. It was very quiet. And I loved it. So I don't really hate snowshoes, but it is just that transformation between that. So that is my big concussion. And as I said, what I knew going in, what I knew about concussion, I knew a little from my two kids, had been concussed, and I knew not to rest. I knew not to overdo it, or to stay in a dark room, but I knew I needed to flip my mindset. But compared to what we know now about concussion, all of the details, I knew the symptoms. Okay, I knew that piece. But compared to what we know now, I certainly did not know. We didn't even have that information. I did not know the systems impaired, for example, right? We just knew gradual return to activity. And that's kind of where that piece ended. Now, before I get into what morphed after that, where my story gets a little different in the repeat concussion piece, I'm going to say this was about 3 months, snowshoe story. And I was able to, in about 3 months, get back on my road bike, get back to running. I wouldn't say, I definitely was not 100%, but I didn't know that. And that's where we get into the next story. So I don't know if you want to know more about symptoms that I had, or you fire away your questions.
So one of the things that I was curious about when you started talking about your immediate like response to it was the supplements. I imagine supplements can be kind of individualized, but are there any specific things that you feel are generally good for people who are dealing with a brain injury that you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can certainly tell you what I did take and what I benefited from. And I tell my clients this, I can't prescribe, but I can tell you what is commonly prescribed, and also what I benefited from. So the standard ones like vitamin D, magnesium, and then there were the adaptogens were huge for me. That's like lion's mane, bacopa, and ashwagandha. Those were huge for brain energy, for returning on cognitive. Creatine was huge for me of turning on the brain, because for me, it was all about turning on my brain. My biggest symptom was I was a complete zombie. I couldn't remember my phone number. I just felt like I had lost my brain. I felt really stupid, really dumb, and really zoned a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So there was dizziness also. But these things were helping me gain some clarity. And then I did take some things for sleep, which were like GABA and L-theanine. And another big piece, and the standard omega-3, because that's a well-known thing. But I tended to gravitate to the things that I felt different for. And it's funny because things like vitamin B, D, omega-3, you don't actually feel anything. But when you take magnesium, you can get rid of a headache. When you take creatine, you get brain clarity. When you take the adaptogens, your cognition improves. So it's really interesting trying the things that actually you can feel. When you take GABA L-theanine, you get a better sleep.
That's super interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think we should probably just throw out there, if you're listening to this and hearing this, talk to your doctor about it. I think it's
please.
Good idea.
Talk to your doctor. Because it's not the same for everyone. It's individual. And also these supplements, if you're taking other medication, there's interactive effects. So you need to find your own protocol. I also took turmeric for anti-inflammatory. I also did all the superfoods, blueberry. And I'm going to add that a big part of my protocol was CBD. Now, that's the non-psychoactive cannabinoid. And CBD was a key to my healing because it took the edge off a nervous system that was constantly in fight or flight. And so we'll get into that later about the symptoms, but that just made me so much more functional. So that was another piece of my protocol. So again, all of this, check with your doctor. But I do think feeling like there's something you can do and you can do to treat that early stages, especially of brain inflammation, lack of oxygen, chemical storm. It helps to know what's going on. Yes. And you need to get educated. Yes. But you also have to be empowered and have something you can do. Even if it's ordering the damn snowshoes and getting out there, getting the supplements, whatever. There has to be some things that you do to feel empowered. So So thanks for asking.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Let's keep going with the story. Tell us more about what.
Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to tell a story about my symptoms a little bit, and then I'll move into the next concussions, but in a storytelling way, because everybody lists off, I had this, I had this, I had this. I don't focus on symptoms heavily with my clients at the beginning. I just say to them, what are the top 3 things that are going on now with your concussion that are interfering with your life? Because it's important to hone in on what were the biggest issues in your symptoms. And for me, it was definitely that zombie brain fog that I could not think straight and was affecting my cognition and my thinking, and my brain energy would just run right out. I couldn't multitask, stuff like that. But here are some examples I'm going to give you just for fun instead of listing off symptoms. Good. So I went to watch my son's hockey game, about a month in, and there was this big net. It was like a black net, I remember, because I was too scared to sit down in the bleachers because I was like, there's going to be a hockey puck come out. So I go up in the upstairs thinking it's all nice and cozy. And there's this black net, and the movement, just the net was making me nauseous. I could not watch. So, and then if I had to turn my head a little bit to watch, that was another problem. right? And now looking back, it's like, I should have analyzed that as an OT, right? But I was just like, I didn't put it all together. And this is where you try to heal yourself as a clinician, but you are concussed. So you are not seeing the whole picture, and you need someone else to tell you, right? I didn't put it together. Then I went to my daughter's grad party, which was so loud and so busy and so exhausting. The small talk, I swear I was just like scripting the same sentence over and over. It was so hard. But of course, I didn't let that on because this was her special grad party. At work, I had to go back to work fairly early because of financial reasons and because I was running my own clinic. I couldn't just quit. So I had to go back to work within the first month. And I was making mistakes in my scheduling, mistakes in my reports. It was just exhausting. I freaked out if anything happened over my head. Okay. So like if someone opened a cupboard over me, or if something was flying through the air, my hands would flinch. I would even see hazards everywhere. I'd be like, why did you leave that big heavy coconut oil up there? Or, just really freaking out about anything near my head. That was a weird thing. And people mistook that as dramatic and anxious, right? And it was like, but I'm not doing this on purpose. My hands would just flinch up. So I was very on edge. I did recognize that as fight or flight, luckily, again, because I did have some background. But there were some things like I missed the bottom stair. I tripped, I bumped into things. Okay. And that I didn't really know. I didn't put two and two together at first because nobody had ever mentioned that about concussion. I hated the speed bumps in the windshield wipers. I hated everything about driving. I mean, if it rained, I didn't want to go in my car because I couldn't. And now we know what the issue is. But when the windshield wipers were on, that's all I could see. I could not see the road because of convergence, and divergence and visual gaze and all of it. It was just like that. But at the time it was just like, oh my God, I can't drive if it's raining. I cannot drive. So these are little things. I could not parallel park. I could not for the life of me parallel park. I still struggle with this. And then there were emotional outbursts. And this is another piece that people don't talk about, but I would get angry a lot, lose my temper. And that's not like me, but I screamed at the neighbor's dog. Somebody was running a tile saw next door, renovations, and I just lost it. Stuff like that, emotional outbursts, that was not the norm. And I'm going to say I wasn't really aware. That's the thing. I was not fully aware that was happening. So even, it doesn't matter how educated you are and how much you know about mental health, about concussion, about whatever. But when you're the patient or client person in it, let's say, it's very difficult to see the whole picture. So, and a lot of these symptoms, they got treated like anxiety, mental illness. I tried going to a counselor who just treated it like anxiety and wanted to delve into my childhood. And it was actually so frustrating. I just quit because I was like, no, I'm not a depressed person. I'm not super anxious. This is just, I don't know what's going on. And it was all nervous system stuff and concussion, emotional lability. And that was just not identified. So that was very frustrating for me. That was very frustrating. But I was lucky in that I did recover from this ski crash within about 4 months, and back to my physical activity. And I credit a lot of that to my persistence and going back into activity and those damn snowshoes. But here's how my story gets a little different. And this is, I know that athletes out there, because I just did a workshop last weekend with a bunch of mountain athletes. And this was a good reminder of my own story, because these are the people who get back out there. And these are the people who are adventurous. And these are people who can't live without their adrenaline rush. And unfortunately, these are the people with multiple concussions. And so I thought it was crazy because every 6 months over the next 4 years, almost like clockwork, I would get another concussion. And it was like, is this bad luck? Do I have a voodoo doll? Is this a past life thing, which I don't even believe in? I'm starting to lose it in the middle of there. Pulled my journal out last night and looking at this going, whoa, like, the nice goals and stuff turns into scribble. And so I know the point at where it's just like, how many times can I do this? And it was stupid stuff like I ran into a tree again because I was wearing a baseball cap. Didn't see it. So take note when I tell you what these next concussions were. So didn't see the tree just above my head. A huge dog on the off-leash dog park was running behind me. Didn't hear it. Missed it. It ran into my legs, knocked me, went flying, hit my head on a rock. Crazy. So I just saw that as bad luck, bowled over. At a party, got clocked in the temple in a crowd. I was in a crowd because I was telling myself, oh, I don't need to be so cautious. Or this is ridiculous. Everything's fine. And then I didn't react, I guess, didn't see the person coming from the side. Okay. Then tripped over a suitcase behind me in my own bedroom, fell, like stepped backwards, fell and hit my head on the edge of the bedside table. Knocked heads with the client. This was crazy. Now, I'm not even counting like the whiplash moments that I know were just blips, because we know that not everything is another concussion. And that was actually really helpful advice from a clinician. So I'm going to start talking about what I did seek out for help. But yeah, so there are things like when somebody slams the brakes on in a car, that would flip me back into symptoms. So that I saw that more as a setback because it's just more of like a whiplash rather than these were actual diagnosed concussions, which is scary. So here's the thing, getting back to adventure, and these weren't even really high adventure things. These were like everyday things, but getting back into life fully when you still have residual impairments, right, carries some risks. So imagine if these things happened and meanwhile, I kept going back to sport. Now, I think that I didn't get injured in sport again because I was extremely, extremely mindful when I was on my bike, when I was on my runs, right? But the bottom line here is you can have minor unresolved impairments. You can walk around with vestibular issues. You can walk around with visual impairments. You can walk around with some auditory processing issues. You can walk around with spatial awareness problems, attention issues, right? And neck problems. And these are now the identified areas of post-concussion that we need to look at in detail, that I do with my clients, that I send them for a multi-systems assessment, very thorough, all of these areas. On top of that, you can walk around with a nervous system that's not regulated. So if you go back into life and haven't had these things assessed and treated, and especially if you're going to be super active and adventurous and try to lead a fully busy life, these are this is a risk. So yeah, so that's kind of what happened. And it's crazy. I mean, I built a whole ton of resilience from this. Like, that's the one thing I'm going to say. I'm thankful for my optimistic personality, because without that, I just don't think I could have done it.
Yes. Well, and all of these things that the ways that these happen, yes, it seems clear looking back, right? Hindsight in 2020, we can say, oh, okay, yeah, my visual system wasn't working all that great. I wasn't aware I couldn't hear the sounds or tell where the sounds were coming from. So I didn't know that danger there. Like, it's no wonder that your nervous system was on high alert all the time. It doesn't know where things are coming from, what's happening. And
exactly,
and justifiably so, because it did lead to other concussions. So I think on the one hand, I'm like, this is really good for people to hear. On the other hand, I'm like, please don't be scared.
No, I know. That's what I think that too. No, don't be, because this is not everybody. And most people, the secondary concussions would happen in their sport. This is kind of out of the norm that it happened in fluke things. So,
Yes. But it's also, I think it is important to see that you're here, you're doing, like, one point is you can walk around, like, even if these underlying systems haven't been fully addressed, you can still live your life and have a good life.
You have to live your life. Here's the thing. Yeah. You have to live your life. You have to live your life while you're healing. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. Oh, that's so beautifully said. While you're healing, still live your life. And so that is really important. I think that's you're a great example of that. And I think it's also helpful for people to hear there are, like, these underlying things. If you still feel like you're a little bit off or things aren't quite there, that's because there are things that can be worked on and continue to be healed. So look into that. Find a professional who knows concussions well, such as Shelley or myself, or there's a bunch of other people too. There are people out there who understand this, and I want people to know that that's available, because so many times people are told, go home and good luck. So
exactly.
I appreciate you sharing all of this. Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah. Well, this is it. That's why it led perfectly into what we know now. Like, oh, here's all the system impairments. This is why this happened, So, yeah.
But so what did you do that ended up helping you understand this stuff, and like getting like what people did you see? What treatments worked for you?
Great. Well, I broke that down into, I figure our life is defined by moments. And if I look back, I have treatment breakthrough moments that I remember, that are like, okay, that changed. Okay, that changed me. Okay, that changed me. So I'm gonna tell that little story, those little moments.
I just love what an OT you are. It's just all about meaningful activity and life and all of this stuff. It's like speaking to my soul too. So this is perfect. Tell us your moments.
Oh, that's great. And I'm not gonna lie, being an OT helped my recovery a ton, right? But here's the thing, I still needed help. So we already talked about the right supplement protocol needing to be empowered and have something you can do right from the beginning. So there's that. Movement. I mean, my own movement, getting back to movement right away, my nature walks right away. There was just no way I was going to sit around. And that was huge. So that was just initial breakthrough moment. But besides that, what I did, so there was a vision assessment. Finally, someone told me, you need to get a proper post-concussion vision assessment. Something's going on here, right? And so that was a breakthrough, because I was like, tell me everything. I already had some knowledge in visual perception from the clients I was working with. I'd already worked a bit in brain injury, but they narrow it down to like, visual field and perception and all that. But this was more specific to concussion. So that was really helpful. At one point in my darkest time, I did go to see another OT. And I was like, I can't believe I'm going to see an OT. I can't even believe I'm spending money on this. And you know what? She reminded me, listen, you are not your concussion. I was like, oh, thank you. And then she was like, are you taking brain breaks? And I was like, oh, yeah. So those were my two OT moments that the OT, so I love telling people, like, tell me something that I've told you that's had great impact, because that's what all I remember from that OT. I was like, oh, thank you. So good. So it was just like stepping away from identifying yourself as concussion, acknowledging that this is temporary. Forgot that part. Huge, huge thing to say to your client. Okay. And then giving them one strategy they can go home with. Because if she just talked about a million things, I probably wouldn't remember and pull away anything. You cannot get all your education in one go. It takes time. That's why I do my program in 3 months with my persistent concussion clients, one thing at a time. But if you're going to go away with something in the beginning, that's what you want to give your client. This is not permanent. You are not your concussion. And here's a tool that's going to freaking help you do it every day. So
yes, love it. I love that.
That was breaking. Thank you to that OT. I don't even remember who it is. It's just terrible. But honestly, my life was such a blur at that point. Going to the athletic therapist. Now, this could be a kinese or a physio, but the person I saw was a concussion at a concussion clinic that I finally went to, probably only once or twice, because again, I just assume I could follow through on my own. But I learned about heart rate, getting back into cardio. I'd already been doing it, but I learned about, just the gradual return to heart rate and a bit more about the blood flow and stuff. So that was super helpful. Neck, I had to go through a lot of different neck people to find a neck person that worked for me. It was horrible. So I wish that not on anyone. I wish that chiros and PTs or anyone dealing with the neck would just identify themselves as, maybe concussion specialist, whiplash specialist, something like that. Because if you're not, it's not a one fits all. I could not be treated with IMS because that was an attack on the nervous system. I could not be treated with a hard Thai massage on the neck because that was an assault on the nervous system. And these are the things people don't understand about post-concussion. and the neck. You can't just necessarily always go hard on something that's damaged when there's other issues going on. When you touch my neck, I now have dizziness. What the heck? And that's because I had cervical instability. And so those are some of the things that can go wrong with neck treatment. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Finally found a chiro who knew about concussion and the nervous system. And then we got some proper neck treatment, which is mostly exercises, but also a little bit adjustments going. That was huge. So I just throwing that out there. Parasympathetic treatments. So here we go. I'm going to call it that. I love that umbrella because this is where Bowen therapy, and you'll have to look that one up, but it's I think you did a podcast with somebody who might have something similar, but Bowen therapy, Bowen, is a treatment that is just very subtle adjustments, again, meant to reset the nervous system. So it's a hands-on body adjustment, but its goal is to reset the nervous system. And that worked amazingly, putting you into parasympathetic. Float tank. Yeah, float tank. I'd love to do an episode on Bowen because honestly, it was a game changer.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that. Is it similar to the orthobionomy? Is that the one that?
Well, yeah, that's the one I was thinking of, but she never really described what she does in orthobionomy. But Bowen is like these little tiny, I believe they go across the tendon or across the fascia, but the goal is to get to the nerves and just settle the nervous system. So it'd be like how you would do across the vagus nerve, just going across different places on the whole body and resetting. So I think there's some proprioceptive piece to it, of feeling your whole body again. There's some vagus nerve calming. So I need to do an episode on that for sure. But the other ones but some kind of therapy that puts you into parasympathetic. Okay. So like not doing aggressive things to yourself post-concussion. That is not the solution. Red light was awesome. PEMF mat. I did PEMF mat that's electromagnetic mat.
Can you spell that for me?
Yeah. PEMF. And it's becoming more known. It's an electromagnetic mat that changes cells in the body, and I just escaping my brain right now of how to explain it in detail. But you can look it up.
I will.
And then self practices. So I would have my list of parasympathetic practices. You can go on my social media. I just posted about one. There's a picture of me doing a puzzle. And then it says, here's my parasympathetic practices for December. There's a giant list. And things like humming, my mantras, my self-talk, I knew my breathing. And this is where we're moving towards the yoga space. I had already been a yogi to some degree before concussions, but from 2016 on, yoga was a gigantic part of my life. So I will get into that. And finally, understanding the nervous system was huge. And I do not want to leave out this important thing, finding a vestibular physio who is concussion literate. So that finally happened. That was rough that it took some time. It just wasn't out there at the time, right? And now they're more well-known, literally, because you're wasting your time if you go to someone who isn't properly concussion trained, in fact. Because like I just said, you end up with aggressive treatments that aren't maybe considering the nervous system, that aren't suited to you. You miss visual impairments, you miss vestibular issues. So that was, again, identifying what my vestibular issues were, how the neck and vestibular work together, like how they're related, how vision and vestibular are related, how everything, these puzzle pieces were beginning to fit together. And it was interesting because, again, my background in sensory integration and in the neurodivergent population came in awfully handy because I was like, maybe I'm neurodivergent now because everything sounds louder and everything is too bright. And I like being alone now. It was like crazy. So that was cool from that perspective. And then sensory integration. I mean, this is what rehabilitation from concussion is, reintegrating the senses, right? So this is where that came in handy too. So, and then, and then finally, so great physio that I finally found. I will give kudos to her at Ladner Village Physio, Devin Conrad. She worked with Natasha Welch. And the two of them, are on top of the space. And so it helped me because she validated things for me and clarified things. And then she also respected my activities that I was using for therapy. And one of those was yoga. We already talked snowshoes. Then there's my bike, which was huge, my road bike. And then there was yoga. So yoga was a key piece in all of this. And I think that's where we can kind of go next if you want. But if you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, I do have a couple quick questions, and we are getting close on time, unfortunately. So I might just have to bring you back again and do part 2. If that's okay. I would love that.
Totally.
But I'm really interested in hearing how you dealt with the anger. You mentioned this a couple of times. It was a big thing that came up for you. And I know it's a big thing for our clients who we see. What do you do? Like, what did you do, or what did you find was helpful, or how did you process it? Like, I just want to, what do you do with all of the anger that is just overwhelming and you don't even know what to do with it, and you're responding in ways that you don't like necessarily?
Yeah, that was really a big thing. So one of them is that I wish that my family and friends had knowledge on concussion, because if they would have been educated, it would have been so much easier on me, because they would have been able to not just like blame it on mental health or resent or whatever, and they would have been more supportive if they would have understood it was just part of the concussion. So that's one thing, is if families and friends could be, partners and families could be more educated. What I did with it, unfortunately, partly I withdrew. I withdrew from some of my relationships and from my marriage. That was probably not the best thing to do with it, but I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't want to be fighting. And then I threw myself into physical activities. So I basically, when you're in fight or flight, which is where anger comes from, partly, you need to move through that. You need to move. And your hands activate, your feet activate, your hips activate, your spine activates. Everything is geared for aggression or running. And so you need to move through that. So I grab my bike and I get back out there. I run to the yoga class and I go through it. I got active and the snowshoes. So I want to tell people I did get back on my bike after every single one of those concussions before the next one, just so they know. Like, you can get back to your stuff carefully. That's a whole nother workshop that I've done. But so that's how I dealt with the anger. I withdrew to some degree, and that was a negative thing, but you just kind of want to be alone when you're concussed because you don't like yourself as much. And it's a tough thing because I knew that I shouldn't be alone so much, but it's what your body is just telling you to be alone. So that was a struggle for me, but that's how I coped. And the physical activity. Yeah.
And if someone is, I love what you're saying about like moving through it. Like the movement is so key, but if somebody is having exercise intolerance, I think that's
hard. Then you got to find little ways. Like you can shake it out. Even if you're having exercise intolerance, like you can push a wall. You can, shake it out. You can still move your body. There's no one who is concussed who cannot move your body. Like unless there's some more serious brain injury, like you need to walk, right? You can move in some way. So you need to do that. Like, I don't care if you're just doing stars with your hands or whatever it is. Like I said, push a wall, shake. I mean, these are some nervous system practices, somatic practices that are more well known now, right? But like, I would just put on those damn snowshoes and go. And it took away the anger for me to do that. Yeah, for sure.
I really appreciate you clarifying. Like, I think that's an important thing for people to hear. I really appreciate that. I would also like to ask you, based on what you've shared with us so far, it sounds like you had quite a number of what people would say is a setback. How, any advice for somebody who is dealing with a setback? Like, how did you manage that? How did you get through it? How did you continue on?
Good question. Being creative is one. Pat yourself on the back for being so damn resilient. You give yourself credit. I honestly say I didn't focus on the negative. I was a positive person And so I didn't sit around and feel sorry for myself. I just was like, get back on the bike, like get back, but slowly, gradually, and strategically. But also besides that drive, like keeping that optimism, keeping that creativity going, keeping physically active, there is also a huge piece that is the spirituality piece. And that I haven't talked about a ton. It's a whole nother great podcast to do. But what I mean here is believing in a bigger picture and finding awe in nature and gaining perspective. So whether you believe in Mother Earth or God, you believe in something bigger than yourself. And that right there steps you out of being like, I can't ski this year, I'm so mad. Like, or how could this happen again? I'm so, unlucky and this sucks. And, you can get very caught up in yourself. But when you have like a bit of a bigger picture and I would go and I would like walk in nature and I would just like feel the bigger picture. And then like gives you perspective, I guess I could say. Spirituality, I think, gives a person perspective. And if you don't step out of yourself and get perspective, it's going to be a lot harder to recover. Yeah.
So beautifully said. Thank you. And I appreciate you being open and honest about what it feels like, though, because I do think that it's important to not try to push it away or like have like the quote unquote toxic positivity about it. Like it's such a balance in all of these things. Like you want to acknowledge, yeah, this is really hard. Like give yourself the space to feel all of that, but also know that it's temporary and seek for those silver linings or that bigger picture, like all of those things that can be helpful as well, that can be pushed aside. I think when you're in the moment, it's like, yeah, I can't even go there. Like sometimes you just have to go be in that, but they're both there. They can both be real and true at the same time. Like it can be really hard and there can be good things about it. Like it's not one or the other. I think it's important to throw that out there too. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's super true. Super true. Because it's like, there's a difference from like being in denial and saying that everything's fine to like acknowledging that this sucks. And I will tell my clients like concussion sucks. Like there's just no way around that. But, you also don't have to be stuck in the negative. You can also see another perspective. Like you said, also, you can have two things at the same time. Just like you can live life while you're healing from concussion. It's the same. So, yes. But I basically want, people to know that, a chronic concussion pattern can be stopped, but it takes resilience. And I have stopped my chronic concussion pattern, by the way.
That is fantastic to hear.
Oh gosh, it's been since 2021. And this year I had a few little things that knocked me that I thought, and they didn't cause concussion. So that was just like huge.
Hallelujah.
Like a thing fell on my head and a car door. And I was just like, so, resolving your remaining impairments. And I still am cautious with my spine. That is not fully resolved. I'm not going to lie. I still have some brain injury issues, but to stop that pattern was becoming aware, resolve the remaining impairments, slowing down, creating safety in your nervous system. High powered people, all those mountain athletes, like there is a point where you got to slow down, right? And you do need to create some safety in your life. Maybe you might have to omit a few things because you can't afford to get another concussion. But also just safety. It doesn't mean you can't do anything, but you just you strategize, right? And you maybe flip the script a little bit, maybe change slightly what you're doing, and then create that safety in your nervous system also, because you can't go through life in fight or flight. Like, I love fight or flight. I'm not going to lie. Like I love a good rush of excitement. And we know that fear and excitement have the same physiological response. Mm-hmm. So if you're a sensation seeker and you like these high speed sports and stuff, you actually enjoy fight or flight. So don't kid yourself. But you don't, it's a different thing from like putting yourself in it and having this great exciting time in it and then coming down and having coffee with the friends in the beautiful parasympathetic mode. That's a different story than because that's like healthy nervous system regulation. That's a different story than like walking around in this level of fight or flight all the time that you never feel safe. And I think that's totally what must have happened to me. It was just too many things. Like where could I possibly feel safe?
Yes.
So yeah.
Like,
so yeah.
I think this is like perfect. I love. Well, okay. I know that you are to your story and a lot more to this. Like we haven't even touched the yoga piece, which I feel like we could probably do a full episode on that. So maybe we
let's do it.
This is our chronic concussion experience podcast episode, and then we'll do a part 2 and maybe even more parts. I don't know. We'll see how we go.
I would love to do a part 2. That would be so cool because I got to dive into the yoga for you on part 2 because it's sort of sat in the background, but it's actually a gigantic piece of my recovery. So I'm super excited, and which is why I work in the fashion that I do now, and I include yoga as part of my practice. But let's do that in part 2. I would love that.
Okay, because I'm really excited to hear all about like what you do. And why don't you give us all a little like teaser so that we can looking forward to the next one. But if people just hearing this much are like, oh my gosh, I want to get to know Shelley more. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and how people can get in touch with you and hear more from you. And then we'll definitely bring you on again. And I'm really excited about that. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So I work as, besides my occupational therapy practice where I see people in person, I also have an online world of OT Shelley. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I do lots of reels, just tips for people with post-concussion and insights and such. And then I run I see clients one-on-one, but also I run a 3-month post-concussion recovery program, which is education, concussion coaching weekly, and a yoga practice. And each week you work on a different yoga class and we work through it progressively. So for 3 months, you basically learn the practice of yoga and how the movement and the nervous system regulation can change you. And it incorporates, the cool part is I love my physio friends because they're like, wow, you got those physio exercises all built in there. I'm like, yeah, I do. Lots of moving the head and twisting and stuff. So it's cool because yoga really does encompass a lot of things. So I'm loving this new program. I've had it going for a year. And I'd really like more people to be aware of it. My favorite is having clients who go to an intensive for rehab, say like vision, vestibular, and all that stuff, and sensory, and then they come out with their knowledge and their practice there, and then they join me, or vice versa. They start with me and then they go to an intensive. So it's a really nice complement for that. So that's been a lot of my clients have been that. And they have something to do at home that's fun and work through, and they have a coach to talk for an hour every week with, we go through one topic at a time. So that's my big baby. It's called 3 because it's a 3-month program, and it's based on OT and yoga practices and post-concussion current practices.
Excellent. And can people find you to do that if they're interested in that program just through your Instagram and Facebook? Is that the best way?
If you go on, I also have a website, OT Shelley. It's on there. Everything's OT Shelley with an EY. And and if you go on the Instagram, you go to Linktree, you'll find the program and a bunch of free resources on there too. So and I'm sure in the new year I'll have more exciting things to offer, but it's been a great success. So I'm excited I just want to share with more people because you know what? I just created what I wish I'd had. Basically, if I would have had someone doing that along the way, it would have been so much easier, than going it alone. So,
Well, I love that you are doing that and that you're making this available for people because I love it. It sounds so
Thank
good.
You. Thank you.
I can feel the goodness of it. It's so awesome, and I just really do appreciate you sharing. I know you're excited to talk about those other things, but I'm really grateful that you were willing and able to share this background with us because I do think that there were so many good gems that came out through this. Really, really good. And here's my 4-year-old.
That's okay.
But
wonderful.
Well, thank you. I'm excited for part 2. Let's get that on the schedule. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much, Bethany. I'm just proud of myself for sharing my story. It was hard to do, but I'm glad I did. And thank you. Take care.
I'm proud of you too.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.